So I've noticed that Christian apologists, and I myself have been guilty of this, but in our eagerness to win people over, we sometimes end up violating part of First Peter 3:15. It's the apologetics calling card. So the Bible commands us in First Peter 3:15 to be able to give a reasonable defense for our faith, but it also says to do it in meekness and fear. Professor Wallace, how can Christian apologists avoid getting too big for our own britches while we're doing evangelism?
I think that's a great question. And I think that sometimes the challenge is that the kind of person who gets interested in making a case is often argumentative to begin with, right? Like that's why we are drawn to something that is a collection of arguments, because we're argumentative by nature. Now, if that's the case, that's going to be hard to solve, right? Because that's just who we are to begin with, and so okay. A lot of the other people I see will start off just so eager because they discover all these evidences. They discover the classic arguments, and for the most part, you will not see me like in my book on God's existence, God's crime scene. I don't tap into the classic arguments, the ontological argument, the cosmological argument, the axiological. I don't tap into any of those. I look at it instead from evidence in a crime scene perspective, right? Because I know that if I said, "Hey, here's a good argument for God's existence," people will say, "Well, that's not evidence. That's just an argument." And also the idea of an argument can be extrapolated into being argumentative. And I don't want to be seen that way. But if you may not see yourself as argumentative, let's say you're not, that's not who you are. That's not the kind of person you are. Okay, fine. Well, it still doesn't mean that you're not going to have an eagerness that in the early part of your career as an apologist might express itself in a almost too eager, like like you're not listening. You're just getting ready to say something. No, we're all guilty of this. I think what happens is the longer you do this, the more you let go of that. You just kind of get wiser with age. I hope I am getting wiser with age, where I'm less likely to be haughty about my approach to people, right? And I recognize, I think, as I get older, number one, I know my own failings before God, and so I know how much I have to rely on the forgiveness of God to get through each day, and that will help you, I think, to be more forgiving of others. Because I think what happens is if you don't think you have anything for which you need to be forgiven, well, you're probably pretty unforgiving of others. It's like, hey, I'm not that. We find ourselves doing that, where we're like, hey, I may be a lot of things, but I'm not that guy. Really? Well, actually, you are that guy. You're everything. We're all the same mess, requiring the forgiveness of God to get to the next day. And that, I think, does help. But I will say this to you, too. There are some practical strategies we can take, especially if we're making the case for God online. And I talk about these in Forensic Faith in the terms of jury selection, right? There are some people that prosecutors will simply not put on a jury. And there are some people that defense attorneys will simply not put on a jury. They're at the edges. They're really biased in the extreme direction of one side or the other. So if you're on one legal team or the other, you're trying to make sure that edge is taken out. And you have people in the second, third group. The ones and fours, we try to take off juries. If you're extreme for the prosecution or extreme for the defense, we try to get those off. We leave people who are basically in the middle. They may be inclined in one direction or the other, but they are going to be fair. And so when I'm online, I'm looking to deal with twos and threes. If you're a one and you're like a really committed Christian and you're like, hey, you know what? I think you're stupid for making the case because this is not about evidence. This is okay. Well, then fine. I'm not going to spank you over that. I'm not going to say anything negative about it. I'm just not going to engage in a critical way because I don't think it helps the discourse. And I think what's happening now in a social media polarization that we see, where you can be online without your real name. And I've said this recently. I think that we should change and make a law for all social media, and it would change the discourse immediately. Here's what the law would be. To be on any social media platform, you need your first, middle, and last name. You need a picture of you with all of your kids and your wife, and you need to have a location that shows me what city you live in. You'll notice that you don't have the kind of social media interactions that we have with your neighbor, because you're going to live next door to that guy forever. And you're not about to be a hammer looking for a nail when it comes to your neighbor. But we do this online all the time because we have no expectation we'll really ever see that person again. And they're using a pseudonym with a fake icon, and you have no idea who they are. And I just don't engage people like that. because I'm looking for twos and threes. So I try to be as just fair. I try to never be hostile. I don't say harsh words on social media. I don't get involved even in provocative words when I title my videos. I don't do any of that because I think I'm trying to help people get back to civil discourse. And one of those ways to get back to civil discourse is to engage in twos and threes. People who really want questions answered. They really are either struggling with their faith or struggling toward faith. Those are the people that I want to spend time with. And so even like on my social media platforms, I still moderate comments because I get a lot of people who come on who they're not there for any other reason, just to mock the people who are there. And when I see that, I'm like, okay, we can't have any more of that. And again, it's because and I also see it from one. So don't get me wrong. I also see Christians who'll be just as mocking of atheists as atheists can be of Christians. I have no tolerance for either side of that. I'm trying to be like Dad, right? If you're going to be part of this tribe that engages these issues, we're trying to do both things. Like you said, we're trying to, what are the evidences for this? And then what is the content of our character as we're sharing those evidences? I'm trying to cultivate both of those.